So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk about Star Wars. And I want to talk about, in particular, all the politicking that was either in The Last Jedi or that people have accused of being in The Last Jedi. However you want to look at it. Some people say, well, I wasn't supposed to be there. Other people say it was. And it wasn't there in the original trilogy, that's for sure. But I don't want to talk about how politics got into Star Wars. What I do want to talk about is the irony of the fact that the political views that they put in there are to the political left. And I think that if you are a very ardent leftist, you should think long and hard about where you fit in the Star Wars universe. All right? Point number one, and this is the main point here. If you are to the left, you generally believe in a bigger, powerful government. So, would you be aligned with the rebels or the resistance, whatever you want to call them? I think they call themselves the resistance in this one. Would you be aligned with the rebels, or would you be aligned with the First Order? I think they're called, not the Evil Empire, the First Order. Well, let's see. The rebels want to be free to do their own thing. The First Order wants to rule the galaxy and tell everyone what to do. So where does the typical leftist sit on this? Well, let's see. They want the government to be able to tell you what kind of health care you should or shouldn't be able to buy. Just set the rules for everybody. You have to do this because they've decided it's better. Huh. That doesn't sound very much like a take the rebellion would have if these things were an issue for the rebellion. It sounds more like something that General Hux or Supreme Leader Snoke or Kylo Ren would say, right? You know, the edict is coming down from on high from the First Order and you will obey. Or the IRS will audit you. Yeah. Hey, at least the IRS isn't sending AT-ATs to your house, right? Walkers and stuff. But no, in all seriousness, that kind of top-down edict sounds more like what the First Order would do than what the rebellion would want. Weapons. Well, the First Order wants to rule everybody. It's kind of hard to do that if people are armed and they're capable of resisting. So my guess would be the First Order would be in favor of gun control, or blaster control as the case may be. In fact, ironically, we have some stuff in the Star Wars universe that tells us that Emperor Palpatine, in the basically after the prequels but before the very first Star Wars movie in '77, when he was finishing up Order 66 and killing off the Jedi, he forbade the Jedi to have the little crystal thing that you needed to make the lightsaber. And they also basically said that if you were caught with a lightsaber, it was punishable by death, because that was a weapon that was useful in the hands of the Jedi against like the Sith and stuff. So it was an iconic weapon. It was a weapon that was capable of fighting for freedom against the evil empire, so they wanted to make sure nobody had them. So in a sense, you could say, well, I don't know about gun control, but they definitely practiced lightsaber control. I mean, they would put you to death if you had one, or the parts to make one. Another thing is that they probably didn't want the rebels having blasters either. I mean, think about it. Rebels without blasters, easier to kill, right? So if you were looking at it, and I'm pretty sure the First Order or the evil empire, whomever, didn't care about, well, what if some rebel child gets angry and comes to school with a blaster and kills everyone? Or what if some rebel shoots his foot off because he's drunk and he's cleaning his blaster? I'm pretty sure that's not what they were worried about. I'm pretty sure they were worried about that when they sent a force of stormtroopers to somebody's house to raid it, they didn't want those rebels to be able to fire back. Yeah, so weapons control seems to be a thing that would appeal to the Empire and the First Order. It doesn't seem like a thing that would appeal to the Jedi and the Resistance or the Rebellion. Why? Because it's kind of hard to have a rebellion if you're not armed, right? I mean, just saying. Censorship. The far left used to consider itself, back in the old days, like when the first Star Wars movie was made, defenders of free speech. In fact, some of the far left campus movements called themselves free speech movements, or FSMs. Nowadays, if you say something that's politically incorrect or somebody somewhere might be offended by, you'll be run out of town on a rail. Maybe not literally, but they'll fire you. There'll be petitions against you. There'll be people calling for your head, metaphorically or otherwise. And, in some cases, some of the stuff that gets them all riled up is genuinely offensive. In some cases, it's like, well, who the hell could be offended by that? It's just the truth. But either way, a person should be free to speak their mind, even if they're saying something that is foolish and bigoted, without being threatened, okay? The solution to somebody who has a genuinely bad idea is better ideas, not threatening him into remaining silent, because that sets a precedent that could be applied to anybody, good or bad, and then nobody's safe. We benefit more from a free exchange of ideas, even allowing that some people will be assholes, than we do from not having a free exchange of ideas. And that's kind of why we have a First Amendment in our Bill of Rights. Just like it's easier to defend yourself if you're armed than if you're not, is why we have a Second Amendment. Yeah, the First Amendment's there because free speech is important. It's a hell of a lot more important than somebody's feelings, I hate to tell you. I mean, if I had to choose between somebody getting offended, even rightly so, or people being able to speak their mind, I'd go with people being able to speak their mind. And the left used to do that too. Remember when back in the day when people who deliberately did offensive things were considered representatives of the left and of free speech? I mean, remember how they used to make guys like the dudes who published magazines like Hustler and stuff out to be like free speech heroes? Nowadays, you say one thing that might be offensive to somebody somewhere on the other side of the world, and all of a sudden you're persona non grata. Very big difference. Politically, that was one thing where I think, the libertarians on the right and people on the far left could agree that free speech was important. Nowadays, it's more important to shut down your political opponents or anybody you disagree with by any means necessary. If you need to, just call them a Nazi and then nobody will listen to them anymore. And who knows, you might get lucky. An angry mob might show up outside their house and burn it down, right? And if that happens, well, it's not my fault. Yeah, I called him a Nazi and he wasn't, but how was I supposed to know that people were going to treat him like a Nazi if I called him one? Because words have meaning. I mean, but, if you live in a world where, the truth is whatever you want, and you don't really need to think about responding to arguments with better arguments because you can just outlaw or denounce people and say, well, you shouldn't have the right to say that. Then, it doesn't really matter what words mean, right? Yeah, so free speech, I think, is something that the rebels would love in Star Wars. The Empire, not so much. I don't think they like free speech. I think they would rather everybody just do what the Emperor tells them and sit down and shut up. And you know who that sounds an awful lot like? Some of these SJW type people. Yeah, the left now. So I think some of them should take a time machine back to the 60s when the left considered itself a bastion of free speech and talk to their predecessors about, where they are and where they're going, because I don't think it's where people thought they would be going. So, and that brings me ultimately to the end of this whole thing. If you are a far left person, like the people who put the politics in the new Star Wars movie, and your idea is to bash the rich and denounce the rich and denounce anybody who has a different viewpoint and denounce anybody who doesn't want to be disarmed and denounce anybody who thinks the government shouldn't be able to tell them what to eat or drink or what doctor to see or any of that stuff, ask yourself where you would fit in the Star Wars universe. Because you wouldn't be welcome among the rebels, what you now call the rebellion, all right? You'd be really only welcome among the First Order, because that's what they're about. They're about one big, overpowerful government telling everybody what to do. The rebels, what do they want? We actually never know, not in this movie and not in the early Star Wars movie. All we know, whether you're talking the original trilogy or now, is what they don't want. Essentially, the rebels represent a negative. They don't want the Empire or the First Order telling them how to live their lives. They don't want to be under the boot of the stormtrooper. They don't want General Hux or Kylo Ren or Darth Vader or Palpatine telling them how to live their lives. What do they want? We don't know, except the absence of tyranny. Maybe they want a constitutional republic. Maybe they want a democracy. Maybe they want to have a king and a monarchy and a parliament. We don't know. All we know is they don't want the evil empire. They don't want the First Order. But guess who the far left would be aligned with, based on where they stand on every one of these major issues, from gun control through censorship, through healthcare even. Yeah, that far leftist talking about how, oh, yeah, I love the resistance. I want to be resisting. I guess presumably resisting somebody like Trump. I don't know how they see themselves, but all these far lefty people who try to identify with the resistance in Star Wars, yeah, you'd be wearing a stormtrooper hat, yo, because that's what you represent. So I really, like, the thing that nobody asked themselves about the politics in the new Star Wars movie, it's not just that it was poorly done and that it shouldn't have been there and that they added half an hour to an already long movie for no reason. It was that, why would you want, like, if you could pick any movie franchise to insert your far left ideas into, why would you pick Star Wars? Star Wars is a universe where if your far left ideas are going to find purchase anywhere, it's going to be among the bad guys. All right? Because who are the bad guys? A big all-powerful regime. Who are the good guys? People who just don't want the government telling them what to do. Essentially, Star Wars is a franchise in which, if you believe in taking away people's weapons, telling them what to think or say, telling them how to order their lives, you get a white stormtrooper's hat. So why would the far left be interested in Star Wars, let alone actually try to ruin it? I don't know. But I do know where they would land in the spectrum of Star Wars characters. It's somewhere to the left of Han Solo and somewhere right around where Palpatine sits. That's not cool. Nobody wants to be evil, old, shriveled up Emperor Palpatine, right? Everybody wants to be like Luke or Leia or Rey in the new movie, somebody like that. Maybe Finn. I don't know. He seemed a little goofy in this one, but okay. Give him an A for effort at least, you know. He would have blown up that battering ram gun if it wasn't for Rose crashing into him. She needs driving lessons. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents about that. And I do think it's funny. You have all of these people who are like, oh, we want to put our far lefty views in Star Wars. Yeah, in Star Wars, your views would be represented by the evil empire or the First Order. Your views are already in Star Wars. Who in the Star Wars universe is trying to tell everybody what to do, take away their weapons, and crush free independent thought? I'll give you a hint. It's not the resistance.